Thank you. So
Yep.
welcome back, everybody. Once again, if you have questions for Danny on this conversation, please click the question mark icon at the bottom of your screen. I wrote down the questions from the previous live so that we could do you hear the motorcycles behind me? Crazy, man. It's crazy.
In the heights, baby.
Yeah, the heights, man. I wrote down all the questions that people posted in the last live. Um, so getting back to our conversation, Danny, I just want to let everyone know that editors are looking for different things. You're not just all
Boom. Yeah.
focused on the same type of stories, right? But people, one way to find, you know, literary agents and editors, someone had posted in the comment, is to look at the acknowledgement sections of the books you read, right? Because usually the writers are thanking these people, and you could look up who these people are, and if these are the people that you're interested in, then you know that if you are working with a literary agent, you could always express, this is the publishing house that I'm interested in, right? Because you know that the editor that you're interested in is within that publishing house, right? So that's one way to go about it. Just read the acknowledgement section of, like, books not only have stories, they also have tons of other information that you could gather about publishing, right?
Yeah.
So
my guy, Yadan Israel, is right now teaching a course on editing, and that's one of the suggestions that he makes is look at the acknowledgments, because then you'll see who the people that were behind the book. I don't.
So I have a question that I meant to ask Carolyn last week, and that was, does a writer need to live within the U.S. for a publishing house to publish them?
No, not at all. It's preferred because you want to be able to put them into bookstores. Whatever city you're in, you want, when your book publishes, to show up at all your local bookstores with that book. And so it's perfect. But there's not really, that's not a thing. Nobody goes, oh, this guy lives where?
A writer from anywhere in the world could query a literary agent in the U.S.
Yeah, definitely with an agent. Again, the way that things are sold, there's a U.S. market, there's a U.K. market, they're different markets. So the way things are sold, it gets a little more complicated. But I think, you can reach out. Again, I've never worked at an agency.
I'm gonna ask a literary agent.
I have a pretty solid understanding of how it works, but don't take my word for it. I might be wrong about some of these answers regarding, the agency stuff specifically. So
another question is, once you finish, I assume that while you're making edits on this book, you're working, with the author as well, that they're seeing the changes that you're making, and they're also fixing things in the same manner, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, it looks different with every book, with every editor, it looks different.
How long is that, usually, how long does that process take of editing a novel, for example? What's the average?
It depends. It really depends, because you have to consider that I'm not just working on edits on one book at a time.
Right.
And I'm working with books at different stages of publication. I might have a book that's coming out in 3 months that requires a whole different set of interventions from me than a book that's coming out in a year,
Right. So you prioritize.
So you prioritize. And, if I said all things being equal, like all I was doing was, I wake up and I edit this book, I still couldn't really answer, because it depends on what the book needs, And so finding an average is hard for those two reasons. But one thing's for sure, like when a book is, when we buy the book as a publisher, we put a projected publication season, right? So whatever amount of time you need to get it done, you need to consider that right at inception. right?
So do you usually give a book like a year to
Yeah,
do all that?
I could say that, yeah. For like a work of fiction, I won't say it's a year in edits, but between edits and all the other things that have to happen, about a
Just
year.
to, from the
For working
moment they
nonfiction,
sign that contract to the moment that it's in bookstores.
so like the production process is like 9 to 10 months. Uh, the editing will probably be like another, I don't know, 3 or 4 months or so. So yeah, like
Ideally.
ideally yeah. It's a really rough thing to give an answer to because there's so many variables. But typically, a work of fiction, you're gonna schedule it for like a year out, work on it over the next year, get it out in time. Working on over the next year includes like you need to do your edits well before a year is up. You know what I mean? Like you need to like turn the book in to the machine that makes the book,
right?
Like 10 months in
So
advance.
you and I also spoke about publishing seasons. Could you
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit more on that?
There's not really much to it, but like books in publishing, there are 2 versions of the seasons that we have. So I work at a publisher that's distributed by Penguin Random House, and Penguin Random House works on 2 seasons, spring and fall. And I'm drawing a blank on what those months are. But then where I used to work at FSG, which was a part of Macmillan, they work on a 3-season schedule. Spring, fall, winter. But that, as long as you know your publication date, you don't really need another season so much,
Right. So I suppose that once an author knows that they're being published during the season, you better be available during that season.
Absolutely. So like,
because they're gonna send you on a book tour, right?
Well, if you're lucky, you get sent on a book tour. Book tours are increasingly rare.
Talk about that. What do you mean if you're lucky?
So book tours are increasingly rare. Not every author is going to get sent around the country, around the world on the dime of the publisher. Publishing used to be like a more robust industry, so there was more money to spend on such things. And from my understanding, that's not a thing that most publishers are spending or opening up the marketing budget to for every book. Not for every book, yeah, for sure.
So they rely on bookstores booking them, and
well, you have
and other entities booking them, but it doesn't come directly from the office of the publisher. They don't. No.
So you'll get a publicist who's gonna set that up for you, who's gonna like if you want to go across the country and you can ask your publicist, hey, I want to be in this market. I'm gonna take myself there. They'll probably do that for you. I mean, but it's different with every book, every publisher. But yeah, you'll have a publicist who's working with you like 3 months before the book comes out, trying to get the book placed in magazines, trying to make events happen, a good few months before the book's publication, up until like a good 3 months after the book's publication. Sometimes that's longer or shorter depending on what place you're talking about. But there's a good 6 months or something like that. Yeah, Daniel's asking, it would be interesting because virtual events, I feel, have a different kind of turnout where, like, I don't know, that's me personally. I've also seen wild numbers where some people get like 1 million people show up, and then most other people are getting like.
Well, when we did Elizabeth Acevedo's book launch for
what was that like? Yeah.
We had about 450 people around there.
Great. Yeah.
And I think just about the same for when we did Julia Alvarez book launch as well.
That's really good. And the thing is, I feel like with events, it's less about like numbers than impact. Like you might have 25 people show up who are super engaged, and they're now like, word of mouth means a lot, increasingly more. But it's hard to get a hold of how do you make word of mouth happen? I think that the industry is kind of still figuring that out. In a country where people just don't care about literature, people don't read, people don't that's the country that we live in. You know what I'm saying? Like you're trying to sell books to people who a lot of whom don't read, and so that's difficult. It's difficult work. and it means that you're going to be limited in your tools based on who you can expect to show up. And, you know.
Right, right. So let's get into these questions. So
Hit it, Angie.
So some of the questions was, how did you become an editor?
How did I become an editor? I feel like I'm still becoming an editor. Can I just be becoming?
You're still growing in the industry.
Yeah. So I took a course, or like a series of classes. There's this program at City College called the Publishing Certificate Program, where it's an undergrad program, unlike most of the like Columbia or NYU. You know, the City College has this really brilliant program that's like modular. Like you choose the classes you want, and there's just this one class you got to take, which is Publishing 101, and it's like an overview. It breaks down the industry. The person that taught that class for me is a person who's very near and dear to my heart. Editor at HMH, a senior editor named Rakia Clark, who's out there doing brilliant work. And Rakia taught that course, and she, you know, for me, becoming an editor meant having somebody go, you can do this job. And that was Rakia for me, you know. So it was the publishing program, and then it was Rakia saying, you can do this work. From there, it was just a matter of like, okay, so what do I got to do? And I had the good fortune of like, I had gotten laid off of a job that gave me severance, and I lived with my partner, so, you know, we split rent. I was able to do that, you know. But I took an internship at like $10 an hour when I was like 26, you know what I mean, for 3 months. I took another internship for about the same amount, you know, and through that process, I started to meet people. I started to get a sense of what the industry looked like, and started to chart a course towards the job that I wanted. And I took a bunch of jobs that I didn't necessarily want. I took a book.
So is this something that you always wanted to do, to work in the industry?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, I've always been like, you can ask any of the several people in here that know me. I've always been a nerd, my nose in a book. But I never even imagined this line of work until I was like 25, 26. Like I had dropped out of college and I went back because I could just like afford to take a class or two here or there, you know? And I was taking a couple classes, and then I found the program, and then I got laid off, which gave me that. Like, it was really like a series of fortunate events, you know? And so
what attracted you about publishing? Because, I mean, for someone to just be working in another field and say, I might try publishing. Let me take this certificate program.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was, you know, I had kind of taken a stab at being a writer and was like, nah, this isn't really it, you know? But at the same time, I was just working, like I was working a reservations desk at a transportation company, and taking classes at City College. And I took a bunch of, I was like, first thing I did when I went back to City College after dropping out was I changed to an English major. Cause I was like, that should have been an English major all along. But like my 18-year-old, 17-year-old mind, when I was registering for classes, was like, that's not a practical, you know, I thought, I was a sociology major. I was like, sociology, I'll become a social worker. You know what I mean? Like it was such a fucked up relationship to education that I had, that I was just like, there has to be a one-to-one. It was a very working class relationship to education. I was like, if I'm going to study something, I need to know exactly what I'm going to be doing with it when I finish. It doesn't even need to be something high paying. I knew social work wasn't necessarily high paying. I knew what social work was. My dad was a social worker. And so I was like, I'm going to do that work. And it was just the wrong thing for me to do. So I ended up dropping out. I took a bunch of different jobs, and I ended up at a desk where I was able to like do my homework while I was at work. You know what I mean? And I started I became an English major at 26, and I just read everything. I took a course on Baldwin. I took a course on Joyce. I took a course on African literature. I took a course on African American literature. I took a course on the Renaissance. Like, and it was just like, that's just what I was doing. I spent like another 2 years finishing my English degree, just reading everything that I could find, or reading everything that these brilliant professors would structure syllabi around. And so after 2 years of doing that, and plus finding the publishing certificate program, I was like, I just want to continue feeling like I'm, you know, like a student in a way. You know what I mean? Like I was happiest at 20. I mean, in a lot of ways, it was actually really depressing to be 26 years old and working a $10 an hour internship. but I was in a lot of ways happier than I ever was because I was doing nothing but reading and fucking writing, reading and writing in response to my reading, you know? And I thought, well, how do you make a job of book reports, you know?
Right. Well, there you go, everybody. If you want to work in the publishing industry, Danny suggests that you get the publishing certificate that City College offers. You go on their website or you Google it, publishing certificate, and the information is on there to reach out to their, the director, right?
David Unger is the director. Aretha Powers is the associate director. They're both amazing. They're both very busy people, but they put on an amazing program.
So then our next question is, what can someone do if they don't have an agent but they want to get published? Do they have to have an agent?
What can someone do if they want to get published but they don't have an agent? I mean, I don't know. Wanting to get published is a weird aspiration. I'll say that. I'll say writers want to write, and as a pinnacle goal is get published. But writers want to write, and you know, there's any number of ways to get published. You can find a small publisher. You know, there are publishers who are, Angie, like you were telling me, how in the DR they have editoriales, where it's more like a suite of services. We have that here in the U.S. too. It's just not the predominant
I found
model.
one for Penguin. Yes.
Oh, that's right. You told. Yeah, that's right.
I told you that there's one for Simon and Schuster.
No, SNS. Oh, you found one for Penguin too?
I found another one from Penguin.
What's the one at Penguin? What's the name of that imprint?
It's in Europe. It's called Calimbra, something like that, and it's a self-publishing arm of Penguin Random House.
Fascinating. Yeah. We're talking about, I feel like we're leaving the people out of the conversation.
Yeah, right. So we had a conversation last week that some of these big publishing houses have a publishing arm where the writer can purchase packages and their books would be under the umbrella of this publishing house, but you're paying them to publish you. You're probably purchasing a package of anywhere between $1,000 to $4,000 or $5,000 for them to publish your book.
Yeah.
And these are services that are available out there. So I was aware of the one that Simon Schuster has. I forget the name of it, but if anyone is interested, you know, just look up Simon and Schuster and put self-publishing on Google, and you'll find it. And then Penguin Random House, I know, has one in Europe, and they publish Spanish.
Yeah. So the thing is, I feel like that it's wild because I didn't know that was a thing. I know that they're discrete, like there are editors, freelance editors that you can buy a package from them where they'll edit your book professionally for you, or there are freelance publicists where they can, you know, they'll sell you a package so they'll publicize whatever book you got.
Right.
I didn't realize that the big five had self-publishing arms, and that's pretty cool. It's a different model basically of publishing than the one that I work in, which is we buy the rights and we're gonna sell it, and we, you know what I mean, are making money on it. It's a bigger game, you know, there's way more money being traded in corporate publishing, but it's no less valid. The thing is also though that you got to be careful, you know what I mean? Like a self-publishing wing of Simon & Schuster is going to be legit. A self-publishing wing of PRH is going to be legit. But there are every day a scammer is born. You know what I mean? So just be smart, you know what I mean?
You're right. Be so
smart.
we were speaking about, because we're going to get into this, that many writers feel that they're not going to gain success if they're not published by one of the big five. But we have witnessed many people who have published, who have self-published, and their book has been so successfully self-published that that a publishing house has picked it up to create another what do they call it? Another edition? What do you call that?
So it depends. There's a lot of, so there's a second printing, which is basically
a second round of printing. Yeah.
When you first publish a book, you decide how much you think it's going to sell, and then you print a certain number, because printing is costly and it takes time. And so you don't want to print more than you think you're going to sell, but you also want to print enough to like leave a buffer so that if it does better than your expectation, the people aren't waiting a year for the next printing.
Right.
Typically publishers are pretty good about leaving enough of a buffer. So if you sold out your first printing, that means that you're doing better than their expectation of the book. That means that they expected it to sell this many copies, and they sold through all of that, and now they're printing it again. Sometimes a second printing, it just happens because the book's been out for like 8 years, and people have been buying it for 8 years, and it needs to print again. But so sometimes it's like a celebratory thing, like, oh, I'm winning the second printing. Sometimes it's just like, oh, this book has been selling steadily for a long time, which is still a good thing, but it's I guess not.
So one of the books that I've mentioned last week that was self-published and did so well that the publishing house Dial Books from which is an imprint from Penguin Random House, for I think they only publish YA. They published Penguin Teen. That's what they.
Dial is I think Dial is an imprint that has like the imprints within it. It's weird. This publishing is like a Russian nesting doll. There's imprints within imprints, and then the imprints within those imprints sometimes. And
so
what
the
they
book
mean
I'm
is
talking about is Juliet Takes a Breath.
Oh yeah.
And Juliet Takes a Breath was self-published. And
was it?
Yeah, she self-published it. And as far as I'm concerned, yeah, it was self-published, or she published with a small press. With an indie press.
So yeah.
Then the book was picked up by Dial Books last year, and they did a second round of printing, and she got all everything that comes with getting published. She got the marketing and they kept the jacket pretty much the same, but now she has these awesome book blurbs, and she has Roxanne Gay give her a book blurb, and
what she got out of that is mostly invisible, really, because it's like you get publishing infrastructure. But that's not second printing. That's a different situation where and it's actually really much more rare, because if you publish a book into the world, there's an expectation that it's only going to sell within like the first 2 years of its existence. Most books only sell within their first 2 years of existence. And so if you publish a book into the world, you're taking one of those years up. You know what I'm saying? Like, you've already published it, so it's less likely that a book you self-publish is going to be picked up to be published again by a big publisher, unless you sell crazy number of that book, which that does happen, I mean, more frequently, but than the alternative. Like, I don't think.
Well, within that time that she published that book, she also worked for Marvel.
That's right. That's right. That's
she
Miss
put
Marvel.
out
She
did the Captain America, the woman, I forget the name of the comic strip, but that gave her more, that solidified her writing, right? Because she was getting these contracts.
She was getting attention.
Yeah, she was getting attention, and her book in turn got more attention. So
there's a way to finesse that from self-published to getting a big deal with a book publisher.
And there have been a few other that we mentioned in last week's live, which everyone can find on our IGTV, our conversation with Carolyn, if anyone is interested. I feel like you answered this question. What is your favorite book to work on and edit? Was it Roya's book?
Yeah, I mean, I get something different from each book. You know what I mean? Roya's book came in to me in a shape that was nearly what we published. So it was a joy to work with her. I love Roya. But on the page, I didn't have that much to do. You know what I mean? Like, it was ready to go. Again, there was a light line edit, and we restructured the order, which is huge in a poetry collection, because they're typically smaller, and like the way that you are reading them, the sequence can mean a lot more. But yeah, so it's just like that was a totally different experience than like working with Bobby Hundreds, where like his main editor was our publisher. So the initial conversations about what the book should be were had with our publisher, Sean. And then I got it to do what's called a line edit, which is, making sure that the voice is consistent throughout, making sure things aren't going too long in places where they shouldn't go too long. And I really enjoyed that with Bobby, because he like put a lot of trust in me, like I made all these edits that I was like, it was the first time I had done like a big line edit. And he's just like, yeah, this is all good. Like, This is great. And then there's Mad and Furious, which was the first book I ever worked on, which it published in the UK. Well, when I bought it, it hadn't published yet, but I bought the US rights for a book that was about to publish in the UK. And then it published, and then it got longlisted for a Man Booker. And so I had like all these ideas about what the book needed, but then I was like, well, this man's been longlisted for a Man Booker. Who am I to tell him how to adapt his book? But yeah, I gave that a light line edit too. And then there are a bunch of books that I worked on for Sean, where it's hard to say which was my favorite. You know, like I enjoy something different.
You're so
about
politically correct, man.
No, but that's a real answer though, because it's not. It's a different thing each time. I mean, to me, it speaks to the difficulty of the job, because I'm not doing the same thing with every book. Every book doesn't come into me in the same shape. Every author has a different, you know, it's like having a new coworker. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're working really intimately with this person, and your relationship to them is going to determine how that work is done. But also, each project is so different that they need different things. So I don't know. I can't really say which is. I mean, there are a couple of things.
All right. Yeah. We will move on to that question, and ask you, what are you using on your hair?
Nothing.
What products?
There's absolutely nothing. Just my greasy ass fingers, which I run through it like 25 times a minute. But I don't do anything.
You're gonna give us a vague answer on that one too?
No, it's a dead ass serious answer. I don't put anything in my hair.
All right, Danny, fine. So someone else also asks, can the power of a publishing house be recreated by the author designing his own team?
All but distribution, and I would say marketing, because like the corporate marketing is such a powerful thing. It's just
I feel like publishers can do a much better job in marketing.
Yeah, but that's you know, there's so many variables that go into how books get marketed. Like that's something I would have to get super political about, because like there's so many variables involved in the way a book gets marketed. But you can, you should, if you're gonna self-publish a book, you should build a team, and it should be like the best team possible for that book. You know, you should hire yourself a publicist, hire yourself an editor. You know, you should do that. You know. That's not typically how people do it. People will self-publish and like do every job, and frankly, often do every job poorly. You know what I mean? Like you know, like it's hard to do all those jobs. Some people do it, some people do it. Some people do it well, but more often than not, what you're seeing is people undervaluing the work and thinking, oh yeah, I'm a great writer. All I got to do is self-publish this thing and put it out into the world, and then I'll see my accolades and my wealth. That's just, you're undervaluing all the work that goes into the book. So if you're a dynamo and you can do the work of all the people on a publishing team, you should do that. You know what I mean? And like there are just important parts of the puzzle that I think get lost when people go, oh, you can do it yourself. You can, but it's hard.
Right. So everyone who needs to ask a question needs to use the question mark icon at the bottom of the screen. Otherwise, your question is going to get lost.
Yeah, I'm not even, like, I occasionally look down there, but I can't read anything on there.
JP is asking, what are your favorite Jordans?
I've never owned a pair of Jordans in my life. I had a hand-me-down pair of Jordans that belonged to my sister's boyfriend when I was in junior high. I don't know what number they were. They were the black and red.
JP is just messing with you, man.
No, I know.
The next question, so that one has been answered. The next question is, how much do you consider a potential book's audience?
That's like right at the inception. That's one of the first things I'm thinking of, is who's the audience. There are a bunch of things that I might read that I'm like, oh, this is so good, but I can't figure out. I mean, that's rare. Like if I love something, then I'm the audience. You know what I mean? But you have to know who you're speaking to. You know, because there's all these different parts of the book. You know, like from flap copy to who the author will be in conversation with, you know, which is kind of a publicity question. But like the cover design, like all these decisions have to be geared towards who that audience is. And so like as an editor, part of my job is, you know, I go into a sales conference. I go into for every season, there's a sales conference, and you have to pitch your books to the sales team. And there are like forms that you have to fill out. Like, you know, give me 3 or 4 books that have sold.
And this is something that you attend as an editor?
Yeah. As an editor with books on a given list, you go to sales conference and you talk about your books to the sales team. It's your one opportunity to really do that. There's launch also. Launch and sales conference are like the 2 opportunities for editorial and sales to like really have.
So what do you get out of these conversations?
What I get with is like dedicated time to pitch my book to sales, because these are the people that are going to go out to the bookstores and tell the booksellers, you know, this is what this book is about. This is why you need it. This is the audience. Blah 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 blah. Because salespeople aren't going to read like every book.
So are these salespeople part of your publishing house team?
Yes, the salespeople are part
Okay.
of. I mean, you have distribution, like the situation that we have at Astra House, where PRH does our distribution, and so it's actually PRH salespeople that are selling our books, but they also distribute for like mad other publishers, you know. They like Verso Books, yeah, there are a bunch of publishers that use that model. But the point is, yeah, I do have to consider the audience like right from the very beginning. And by the time sales conference comes around, I have to have a really good pitch for that audience so that I can serve that to the salespeople, so that they can. Book publishers use a series of convincing people. You know what I mean? Like author convinced the agent convinced the editor convinced the salespeople convinced the bookseller convinced the reader.
What about this question? What if you don't think there's an audience, but the author swears that they have one?
Convince me, like that's all there is to that. You know what I mean?
So then,
let's say
it's an author that maybe has like 2 or 3 posts on their Instagram. They opened their Facebook page like 4 months ago. They're not even on Twitter, and you can't find anything else on this author.
I would say an author with that setup, but with meaningful content and meaningful engagement, is more important to me than an author who has like 20,000 followers. But the content is just not anything that I think is, you know, you could be really dope at one thing and not be that good at another. Or you could be good at doing this thing, you know what I mean? Like social media is not writing. You know what I'm saying? Writing is writing. So it's like, it's not good enough to like, oh, I have a following. There are editors, there are publishers that will do that they're just looking to, you know, like we're all just looking, it's capitalism.
We know a certain person who published a crappy book and had a huge following.
I get political about this because there's too many bad books in the world. That's just how mediocrity works. So I'm not going to go trashing people's books specifically.
Whatever you're selling is what matters. So forget, you know, who you are in the rest of the world, you know, how popular
what is the project you're trying to sell me?
Right?
Convince me about this project. You also have to convince me that you're the right person to do this project, so that your profile has to line up with the project. But if I think that you have a great platform and maybe you've written some great things before, but I don't think this project is it, it's my job. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's literally my job to make those decisions, but it's also like my job is on the line. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's not enough to just be like, I have utter faith in this person because they convinced me. No, I have to actually believe it because it's on the page. Because I'm going to be held accountable if that book doesn't sell, you know?
Okay. Oh, I couldn't even see this one. So what would the publishing industry look like? How would it be different than today under your ideal social, political, and economic conditions?
That's a trick question.
And I know you know who asked that.
This is okay. So I don't know. My political education hasn't taken me far enough to imagine that future just yet. I know that I have fundamentally anti-capitalist politics, and so, you know, my ideal world, we're only working on things that we believe in. That's my ideal world. That's not how it always ends up. I've had the good fortune of being able to only work on books I believe in because I've worked with amazing people. At Astra House, Alessandra Bastagli, our editorial director, who's brilliant and has had such a brilliant long career, trusts me to just do my job. You know what I mean? And so I've been granted a lot of trust in just deciding what books I work on. Ideally, that's how the whole industry works, and nobody is, you know, going after, You know, I've had books that I've lost where I'm like, damn, that's the wrong editor for that book. You know what I mean? But they see the potential, you know. But seeing the potential doesn't mean you're the right person to publish the book, you know.
Right.
So you know, ideally everybody gets to work on the things they believe in and gets to be the best advocate for the things that they want to work on.
All right. So another question is, aren't all these things, choosing the book's potential, identifying the audience, etc., subjective? Isn't this where the gatekeeping can happen?
Yeah, it's absolutely subjective. And that's literally, yeah, that's literally what I'm saying, is that all media, if you have a job in media, you are a gatekeeper just by virtue of the fact that, like, it's all subjective. So people make decisions about what a small group of people makes decisions about what a larger group of people is consuming. That's that's the nature of media. You know what I mean? So I think that there's that term is thrown around in a way that doesn't always make a terrible lot of sense, you know? Like, people use gatekeeper to be pejorative, and I get what is meant by that. But if you talk about, you know, this is just what the industry looks like. So yes, I am a gatekeeper by virtue of being a person who decides. And yes, it is subjective. You know what I mean? It is 100% subjective. I'm determining based on my taste and intellect. You know what I mean? And people trust my taste and intellect enough to give me a salary to do this. You know, but that's just what it is. You know, like I can't imagine changing, really. You know, ultimately the work has to be done by somebody.
Right.
So, you know, somebody has to make decisions. Right. And quite frankly, often it's not people that look like me or come from where I come from. So I don't know.
Okay. So we're going to ask you.
It wasn't flexing, bro.
I'm
just trying to protect my
you
ego.
again. Maybe you'll answer this question now.
Coño, esta maldita. Otra vez. All right. You know, what makes a bad book? You know, for me, what makes a bad book? No, I'm not going to go into that.
Everyone, like we were saying before, every editor has their own preference on what it, and good and bad is subjective depending on who that editor is. They, you know, again, I'm gonna say somebody published American Dirt and thought that book was excellent.
I didn't read it.
Thought that book was excellent.
So I couldn't explicitly tell you.
There was an entire team who thought that book was excellent. Okay.
Listen.
So you see how subjective.
But you know what? But here's the thing. But I will say this for that book, right? That book sold wild numbers. You know.
Yeah.
That was a decision based on how much money they thought they could make with that type of book. Because that type of book gets published every fucking day and makes tons of money. So we could talk all we want about, like, the people that made the decisions.
Because
you should be mad at the people with bad taste who spend money. Be mad at people with bad taste who spend money. Because people with bad taste. White people
thought that book was so interesting. And
it's not even just white people.
Oh my God.
There's a bunch of non-white people who defend it too.
But the majority of white
it's a lot of people with bad taste in the world, is the thing. You know what I mean?
Well,
it's a lot of people with bad taste in the world. It's a lot of people who don't apply their intellect.
If anyone wants to get more information on this book, please go on the Oprah's
book. No,
Angie.
Why are we talking about this goddamn book? Sending people that way? This is part of how it happens. Because we talk about how bad it is, and people go, oh, I want to know how bad it is. I want to make up my mind for myself. And honestly, that's the smart response.
Yes,
the smart response is to say, I want to know for myself. Don't even talk about it. I feel like, don't talk about bad books. They don't deserve your air. They don't deserve your energy. Talk about good books. Let's talk about J.P. Infante. Let's talk about Roya Marsh. Let's talk about
They do not, but we still need to give people insight on what is going on in the publishing industry.
Not really. Sometimes I think people need to know a little less about what's going on the inside. People need to focus on their end of the thing. You know what I mean? Go out there and go to the book events. Read the books. Talk to your friends about the books. Focus on that shit and just trust or don't trust, because the corporate publishing is corporate.
I agree. I totally agree on that. But I'm also the type of person that feels that you know, I didn't purchase the book and I haven't read the book, but I was interested to know on everything that was happening surrounding this book, because
Angie, you're a stakeholder. You know what I'm saying? Like, you work in this, even though you don't work at a book publisher, you work within the world of book publishing. Your work that you're doing with Dominican writers, like, of course you should be interested. You should want answers to those questions. And the community that you're a part of It's a bunch of literary people. So y'all should have those questions. You know what I'm saying? But there's a difference between people all in the not in the literary community, because like the literary community is outside of the publishing community. You know what I mean? It's just people who are writing and people who are reading. But I don't want to promote to people to be concerned with things that don't concern them. The industry shouldn't be of concern of the average reader. The writing should be the concern of the average reader. And if people were more concerned about the writing, they'd stop talking about American Dirt. Because it's boring. Bad writing is boring to talk about. You know what I'm saying? If if the average reader was more concerned with reading and writing, we'd be having less of these conversations. That said, you and Roberto and the Dignidad Literaria thing, you're in this. You know what I'm saying? You have a stake. You have a stake in it. So of course you're gonna be interested in it. But I don't want to promote to just everybody. You know what I mean? To like, oh, have an opinion. Don't have an opinion on the publishing industry. Have an opinion on books. Have an opinion on writing.
I still agree with you, Danny.
I know. I feel like I'm shouting at you. I'm sorry.
No, you're passionate about it. It's okay. I don't take anything personal at all. Don't worry about it. So one question that we have here by Clara is, what are the 5 must-dos to be considered a must-pick of a book / author to work with?
That's a hard one, but I could, if I'm creative about it, I think I can answer that. One is, like, make sure that publishing a book is the most important thing in the world to you. Don't think of publishing a book as like, oh, I have this like idea of myself and I'll publish a book, I'll do this and I'll do this and I'll do that. And publishing a book is just one of those things. Don't be that. Don't be that. Because there's several people, there's a lot of those. Me personally, I don't want to work with that person who like a book is just a part of like, you know,
it's something on their bucket list.
On their bucket list. Don't. This is a business. People do this work professionally, but also there are writers who dedicate their life to writing and to literature. It's disrespectful to those people, you know. Like, don't.
So you want them to be passionate about their work, about their writing.
Yes. And you don't. That's not to say that like you have to decide you're going to be a writer for the rest of your life or whatever. But whatever project you're going to go out and try to sell, you better be 100% passionate about that. You better be willing to dedicate the next 2 years of your life, at least, you know, to that book. And so that's rule number 1. Number 2 is just be good to people, man. You know, there are people who are assholes. That whatever, treat them however you will. But the person who you know you don't really meet when you get your book deal and you go into the office and they're taking you to meet all the like executives, the person who's taking you around, be good to that person, because that person wants to be an editor probably, or that person wants to be a publicist probably, and in fact they probably are already an editor or a publicist and are already doing that work. And oftentimes the assistant level employee is doing the like all of the work. You know what I'm saying? Like all the work that like, you know, of an editor, an editorial assistant is often doing. The work of a publicist, a publicity assistant is often doing. So, but they don't get the pay and they don't get the dignity of like having that title on their card. They don't get the dignity of being treated like the people that do that work. So treat everybody well. And by everybody, I don't just mean like all the executives that you meet, because when you're an author,
well, that should be a human.
It should be a human thing, but listen, you'd be surprised.
No, I could just imagine how many people sign a book contract and it goes to their head and then they feel like they're, you know,
I personally never seen it. I personally never seen it. But I've heard, you know what I mean, people being treated poorly by and I'm not just talking about authors. I'm talking about like, if you want to become an editor, if you want to do anything in this business, you know, there's too few people. Everybody's gonna know you're an asshole. You know what I mean? Like, but the problem is that like you can become a powerful asshole. Each other. Everybody knows each other. Everybody's like one degree removed from everybody else.
You know, even though we have all these publishing houses and all these imprints, it's still you guys all practically know each other, and things gets around.
Yeah, but and I mean, saying that, awful people attain power every day. So like I say it not to like say this is how you attain power. You know, if you're an awful person, I want to abuse you of the power that you have. Straight up, like doesn't matter anywhere in the world. If I can abuse a oppressive person of power, I disabuse them of their power. I will do that. How do you choose the right editor for your project or book? How do you choose the right editor? That's a good question. it's, you know, it's a question that, like, obviously as the editor, I'm gonna have a slightly different answer than what an author would say, and you might want to hear what an author would say about that. But I think you want to be, you know, you want an editor who, like, fundamentally shares your vision for the book, you know. So, you know, when an agent sends me a manuscript, we have a conversation, and I go, oh, boom, I just read this thing, and here's what I think. You know, here's who I think the audience is. These are the people that I think, you know, this person is already in conversation with. You know, these are the authors that I think that they're like. This is how I understand the book to be. And then me and the author will have a conversation, and sometimes they'll have like a different vision, and, you know, we'll kind of settle on what the vision should be. But it should never be where you know, you speak to an editor and they're like, hey, boom, this is what the book is going to be. You know what I mean? Like, if you experience things that way, then you probably don't want to go with that person. You don't want a tyrant editor, you know. But I don't know. All the editors I know are super nice people. You know, like, I don't know. I think there's just the one thing. Is just make sure that you have a shared vision.
Okay, let's see.
So I guess, I don't know. It's not like there's a door you cross. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still not sure I'm actually a part of the publishing industry. I might just be deceiving myself that I have a career here. But I remember the first events that I went to in book publishing, and I think they were like Young to Publishing. There was this group. I was a part of the American Publishing Association called Young to Publishing, and, you know, young means a very specific thing in that context, because I was 26, an intern, and going to these events and finding that Young to Publishing actually meant like literally like 20, 21 years old. And so, which you wouldn't think is like a crazy gap, but it was also like largely white women. So it was like largely 20, 21-year-old white women at these events. It wasn't like an oppressive environment, but it was one where I found no real corner, you know? So, you know, just the things like small talk, you know, like there are events with a bunch of people that want to make it in the industry, and it's mostly just small talk. It's not like you have business to talk about. And that small talk was super hard at first, because I was just like, I'm literally in the wrong place. So I don't know. Those first events, I would say, were hard. My first job, like my first proper publishing job, which was a publicity and marketing assistant at the New Press, was really cool. Like, it paid like not enough to make a living on, but it offered a lot of insight, and so, you know, you learn a lot at the start. You learn a whole lot if you're paying attention. You know, not just like how to do the job, but like who are the stakeholders in this industry and like in this company, you know. But I found my start to be super informative, and it should feel like that, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I don't know if I have a number. Like I said, we do 25 books a year at Astra House. There are like 3 of us acquiring books. There aren't really set, like, you have to have this many projects working at a given time. We're collectively trying to make our list of books work and make sure that we have the number of books that we set out to publish. At any given moment, I'm working on, let's say right now, there's like 2 or 3 things that I'm working on. When I was at MCD, there was a higher. I was working on like my boss's books as well, and so I'd be working on like 3, 4, 5 projects at a time at different stages. You know, books just about to publish, books about to publish in 3 months, books that we just got in. And books that you just get in, you're not typically editing immediately. You know what I mean? Just because where's the time? You don't have the time, so you kind of get a book in and then you kind of sit on it for a little bit. And not sit on it, but like do other work, you know. But at a time, I have like 3 or 4 books on my mind that I'm like, there's something that needs to get done.
So do you guys work like the cops, that you got to complete a quota?
I don't work at all like the cops. Like, defund the
Meaning,
police.
you
Defund the
know, you
police.
just mentioned
Abolish
that
the
you
police.
guys publish 25 books a year. Is that something that you set out to
Oh,
do
you mean quotas?
intentionally?
That's funny. Wait, I'm sorry. What was the question again, Angie?
Is that something, publishing 25 books a year, is that something that you set out intentionally? And what if you don't find 25 books to publish that year?
You'll find them. There's a lot of books. There's a lot of books. What? I don't get that impression at all. There's a lot of books that come your way every year, and also it's a goal. It's like a goal. I mean, and also like that kind of intention setting is above my pay grade. You know what I mean? Our publisher and our editorial director, they determine how many books a year we're going to publish, and they kind of, if they feel like I need to be taking on more books, they'll let me know. You know what I mean? It's not as rigid as you might think. You kind of take on as many as you can, because the truth is that there's a constant stream of books coming into my inbox. To tell you the truth, the projects that I'm most excited about right now, I can't talk about just yet, because we're waiting to, you know, properly announce them. So I can't talk about things that I'm most excited about right now, but I will be able to in the near future. You know, maybe me and Angie will do a thing and talk about some of those projects coming. But right now I'm kind of still in like Roya Marsh mode. I really want everybody to, you know, get their hands on a copy of that book. It's the rest of 2020 is dedicated to Roya Marsh.
So get out there to your local bookstores and please support Roya Marsh. You will not regret it. And if you don't know who Roya Marsh is, please Google her. Go on YouTube and look up her work, because she has tons of amazing, amazing performances.
If you don't know, Danny, now you know.
Danny, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Angie. I love all the work you do. Thank you for being the person that you are in the community. I really appreciate you.
And having this great conversation. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Is there someone, what is it? Oh, somebody asked, what's in your cup?
Oh, it's just water.
But thank you everyone who joined us tonight for this conversation with Associate Editor of Astra House Publishing, Daniel Vazquez. This is a series that I started last week. Our next conversation is going to be with Saricia Fennell, who is a publicist for the authors. So, but you might also know Saricia because she works with Latins in Publishing, and she also runs The Bronx is Reading. So stay tuned, follow our stories, follow our posts. If you want to see last week's conversation with Carolyn Bleak from Flatiron, you could check it out on our IGTV. We have tons of content in our IGTV section, so you might want to run through it and take some time and view them, because we offer you guys a lot of information about getting published and writing and everything you might want to know. So thank you once again, Danny. We'll be in touch.
Talk soon.
And everyone, have a good night.
Good night, y'all. Peace. Have a good night.